Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. Your host, a behavioral scientist and bachelor, talks to leading experts and successful singles about living solo and living well. Travel more, make things, sleep in when you want to. Here's the playbook for the person who is unapologetically unattached. Now, please welcome Dr. Peter McGraw.
Welcome back. Our series on making remarkable friends continues with today's episode featuring Mr. KOA and Top Boy, two friends living remarkable lives. Besides talking about the origins of their monikers, we talk about their transition from athletes to artists and entrepreneurs. Make sure you stick around to learn about how their friendship developed, how they use their joint podcast as therapy, and what would be the only thing that would break them apart. As an aside, I met them on Clubhouse, the new hot social media app that features real-time conversations. If you find yourself on the app, look for Solo, the club for singles, on Clubhouse. Solo has already nearly 10,000 members and is only a few months old. The future is bright for single people. I hope you enjoy the episode. Let's get started. Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. I'm Peter McGraw. My guests are two Black millennials navigating entrepreneurial spaces in the world of dating in their podcast, WNTT. We Need to Talk. They bring business expertise, relationship advice, and the love of media into engaging conversations with their guests, or sometimes simply between the two. My first guest is Ryan Malcolm-Campbell. Known professionally as Mr. KOA, Ryan's dream of professional basketball was derailed when he was injured on his university basketball team. He went on to finish his business degree and lives in Toronto, where he works in photography, video, animation, and a host of other entrepreneurial endeavors. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you, Peter. This is going to be quite the show. Glad to be here.
My second guest is Zamour Johnson. Zamour is known in the world of media as Top Boy. After quitting his 9-to-5, he turned his hobby of being a certified drone pilot into a business and now works full-time as an entrepreneur. Born in London, England, he lives in Toronto, Canada. Welcome, Zamour.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
We are here to talk about friendship. This conversation is part of a series on making remarkable friends, and I have a saying that solos need a team, a wide, interdependent group of personal and professional connections to support you, and you support them. And I think friends are the most notable of these connections. In this series, I've been talking mainly to experts, but I met the two of you in a room in Clubhouse. Clubhouse is the new hot social media app. It's a conversation-based app. And in that room, I was really impressed by your camaraderie. So before we start, I want to talk to you about do you call them aliases? Do you call them nicknames?
I've never called it anything, to be honest. You can say alias. Alias works.
All right.
A brand alias.
Yeah, it's like a superhero moniker.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So as I said, Mr. KOA and Top Boy, where are their origins? Why do you use it? I have to say I'm a little jealous.
You could be what? PM?
P McG?
P Mick? So Mr. KOA is an acronym. KOA is an acronym for my company, which is King of Arts, which started in university after getting injured from my university basketball team and getting cut from that same team while I was recovering and rehabbing. As a result,
brutal business, isn't it?
Quite the brutal business. But as a result of that, honestly, it was a blessing in disguise. Being an athlete, as most athletes know, especially if you're playing for a university team or a high level, you eat, breathe, and sleep your sport. So I never actually had free time ever like that before. So it actually, as frustrating as it was to not be on the team anymore and not be my guys and playing on the team and having games, I now had like an unlimited amount of time that I've never experienced before. And I've always been into creation and artistic stuff and designing stuff, but because the basketball is such a priority, I never really dove into it. And with the time away from it, I had the time to try it. So I started to sketch, I started to draw, I started to design things, which snowballed into me starting my first company, King of Arts, which is essentially a clothing brand at the time when it first started. It was just clothing stuff, just hats and shirts and stuff like that. And the name King of Arts came because I had the ability to pick up different things so quickly. I would draw, I would sketch, I used to sing for fun, I could cut my own hair, I could do all these different things, all these artistic things. And the game of basketball in itself is an art form as well. Mm-hmm. I was going to name my brand or the company, I was going to name it Jack of All Trades, because people always say, oh, you're Jack of All Trades. And I was like, that's not original enough. I know what it means, people know what it means, but I want something unique and something that I have to explain. And I like from a business perspective, I have a business mind. I like the act of explaining things because that means someone's interested, you know? So even the fact that you're like, what's KOA? Every time someone does that, I have the opportunity to explain myself and better educate you and then also build my brand that way. So I kind of like that it creates that cure. Like, is it KOA? Is it KOA? Like, I kind of like that people don't know. I get annoyed that people say KOA, but I get it because there are no dots between it. So you're not going to know it's an acronym. But even that conversation where I'm like, oh, actually, it's KOA, and this is why. So is another way just me to kind of lead into branding. So I came up with the name King of Arts as a result of my desire to be good at many different things, not only myself, but my brand, to be the king at multiple different art forms. And that has been the vision and the creative direction through my brand. And it speaks to everything I do, that anyone who supports my brand or is part of my brand or underneath my brand is working at being the best or being the king, whatever potential art that they are pursuing. So that's how KOA came up. And then I became Mr. KOA. So I am not the King of Arts. King of Arts is the brand itself, but Mr. KOA is I am part of my brand. So I just kept it very short, 5 letters, and it's very easy to remember.
And if I remember correctly, you started to use this moniker before you were king of arts, so to speak. Like, you were still learning.
It was before I wasn't a photographer. I wasn't doing animation. I wasn't doing a podcast. All I was doing was sketching faces and making some clothes. So my goal was, I knew it could be something larger than what it was. I didn't know what it was going to be, but my goal is to make it bigger than whatever it was at that time when I created it. So now we're 8 years later since I launched it, and I can truthfully say the KOA brand is now a conglomerate. You know, I have small businesses I work with. I have creatives that are under my brand. I have models. I have clothing. I have the podcast with Zamour. Like, there's so many different branches now it has become, and it's basically a hub of everything I do now, which couldn't have been something I could have imagined. I didn't plan it to be like that, but I knew it could be something bigger than what it was at the time, and I'm just happy at the progression and where I am now.
You know, I would use this term. I did check out your stuff, and I'll put it in the exhibits for people, and I encourage them to check out both of your folks' websites and Instagram in particular. But there is something about this idea of curiosity, right? So Mr. KOA kind of creates a curiosity. And I think the way your website works is often, it's not exactly clear always what's happening. It is a distinct feel and look. It doesn't look or feel like every other website in a sense. And so I congratulate you on that idea, because I think it can, for the right person, the curious person, to get them to lean in and learn more.
Yeah, thank you. And I structured it in a way that it forces you to dig if you want to, right? Like, it's also very linear if you're there for a particular reason as well. And I kind of structured it that way. Like, if you don't want to dig into my shit and you just want to get a photo shoot or find my work or my shop, it's right there. You can click through there, and you might not go on any other pages. You know what I'm saying? And it can still facilitate you through the website without you having to find out anything. But it also allows you, if you do want to dig for more, there's a lot of different options that you can be on my website for a while if you really care to be.
Yeah, it's like an onion. You can keep peeling back as much as you like.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. Zamour, a top boy. I like this moniker. I'm going to call it moniker. I think nickname diminishes.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
We could do moniker.
I like your moniker too. What's the story behind Top Boy? It has an international element to it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think that I got the name from the show Top Boy off of Instagram, which gained recent popularity once Drake helped the new season come out. But it's been around it was around for like years before that, right? Just basically cult following in England. I got the name, but long before the show even existed, when I created my Instagram, really just because I grew up in England, but I moved to Mississauga, which is just outside of Toronto, when I was 7 years old. So super young child, but I was still like very in touch with my British roots, my family, my cousins, and all that type of stuff. And basically, Top Boy is just slang in England for leader of your crew, right? Or whatever affiliation it may be, right? I mean, the show was dealing more so with narcotics, like I should say, but in general, it means if you're best player on your team, you're the top boy, or in anything like that. So, you know, I just kind of felt at the time, based on things that I was doing, that, you know, I was always the leader or in my little crew. So I was like, that's just going to be my moniker from that point. And then it kind of worked out, because once I entered the freelance world and started doing drone work, I had a lot of people saying like, oh, like your name makes sense because you do a lot of aerial photography and footage. Even though that wasn't my intention whatsoever, I let it stick. And then it kind of transitioned to other things as well, because I'm involved in the film and television industry, and I do video work just like Ryan. And then on top of that, I'm doing stuff in the fitness industry. I would like to say I'm kind of near the top, but always willing to learn in multiple industries. So therefore, like, no matter which one I'm in, I'm always going to be near the top. And that's kind of where I'm at.
Mm-hmm. This is a digression. Forgive me. I'm a big fan of British gangster film.
Yeah.
Have you been watching Gangs of London?
Yeah. We destroyed that show.
Okay. I told last summer, like in the middle of quarantine, I remember one of our friends, Shane Sterling, had told me about this show, right? And one of my cousins in England, actually, they told me about the show. And I watched the first episode, and I was like, this is a movie. Like, it was 2 hours long. And I was like, this is a movie. I thought they said it was a show. Then every episode was an hour after that, but I couldn't. We binge watched it. It was incredible.
I'm afraid to start watching it for that reason. Like, I think.
Oh, you haven't started?
I have not started.
Oh, you need to start.
You need to start.
That's great. So you two are your friends. Do you consider yourself business partners?
All the above.
Yeah,
all the above. I think
competitors, frenemies,
everything except competition.
Okay.
Yeah. I've never viewed Zamour as competition. We're both athletes in our own right, different sports, and I think because of that, we view things similar to an athletic perspective. Like, if I'm doing well, you're not my team, you win too. If you're doing well and I'm on your team, I also win. So I don't really care if I score 40, if Zamour scores 40, or if Zamour has 6 goals or I have 1 goal. Like, if we win the game, that's all I care about, you know? And I think more people need to view things that way when it comes to their friends, rather than trying to fight their friends for scraps or climb over their friends or throw their friends under the bus to kind of get ahead. It's like I literally look at it in the simplest form as if I get famous or rich or whatever comes first, Zamour is going to be right there. Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, it's just my fate. Like, I'll pull Zamour exactly where I am. And I think the exact same thing. If Zamour blows up for whatever reason, he'll be like, these are the guys that are going to be up there with me anyway. So it's more of a race to who gets there first, I think. I think the competitiveness is us against everybody else. I think we both have that competitive edge of like, whoever gets there first, sick. I don't really give a fuck if it's me or if it's you, but one of us are going to get there. It's going to happen. It's not even when. You know what I mean? It's not even if, sorry, it's when. So I've never viewed him as competition. In fact, I bring him on projects. He brings me on his projects. We've done stuff together. We've been hired for stuff together. We do our own things separately. We do similar things, but very different styles. Yeah. And I think it's interesting because we both have, like, I have a few more followers than Zamour does, but we also still have the same type of network for the most part. So it's like, I've had situations where people have worked with me and then worked with him after, and worked with him and worked with me after. Like, it hasn't created who am I going to choose kind of dynamic with the people in our networks. And I think that's been interesting because I think that just shows that people appreciate both our work for different things, you know? And that's very rare, especially in this environment, in this industry where people can work with both people and not have to feel like they have to pick somebody. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh. So, you don't make anybody's pick either. So
no, never.
Zamour, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, like, I agree with a lot of what Ryan is saying, because one of the things that we've talked about quite a bit on the podcast in relation to things that happen in the freelance industry, I don't know what it's like in other cities, but I know that here there have been times where we've run into people who feel like if I'm doing work or I get a gig, I'm therefore taking money out of your pocket, right? I think it's hyper competitive, and we've just always kind of lived by this mentality that there's enough food to go around, especially if you just know where to look, right? So for me, I just think that we've never had that level of competition with each other. If anything, it's more so a healthy competition where it's like, I learn a new skill, Ryan learns a new skill, right? And it might not even be 9 times out of 10, it's never the exact same skill. It's like, I might learn, something like a new lighting technique or something in the lighting world. Mm-hmm. Ryan will learn motion graphics. You know what I mean? It's like, and these are things that I'd say 3 years ago, people, I assume if they looked at us, they wouldn't say that would be in our wheelhouse of tools.
I see.
You know what I mean? So I think it's a case of, the cream just rises to the crop mentality. Like when you see people in your circle doing things that are elevating their own level of success, it should force you to want to do the same thing, right? And some people can get caught up and be like, well, this person's doing this, like, now I got to compete with it. It takes a negative connotation. I've never felt that way with Ryan. So that's probably the major difference with us than most people in our field.
I think that's great. I have 3 observations hearing you two speak. The first one is something that's come up on the podcast. It's a term I'm stealing from the poly community.
Yeah.
And the term's called compersion, compersion. And it's basically anti-jealousy. And I say that's an important element of a remarkable friendship. So that is the person has some appeal, they're trustworthy, they're reliable, and they're anti-jealous. That is, they are going to celebrate your successes and they're going to commiserate your failures. Bad friends don't do that. Bad friends try to diminish your successes and outdo you on their failures. The second one is, I do think, and as an athlete, I think the two of you can appreciate this. Like, so Zamour, you're a boxer.
Yes.
You don't want to fight someone who's not a worthy opponent. You don't, as a basketball player, not only do you want to have a worthy opponent, you actually want worthy players on your team because, when you play with someone good, they make you better. They inspire you. They teach you new techniques and so on. And then the last thing is, and this is to your point, Zamour, is I have this big belief that too many people think that there's a fixed pie.
Yeah.
And so when someone takes a slice of the pie, that's one less slice available to everyone else versus the idea of growing a pie. And so when you're bringing a lot of value, to use a clubhouse term, value to the world, then suddenly people recognize, oh, this is a worthwhile thing. And it basically creates more business, not less business as a result of it.
That makes a lot of sense.
I can see how this camaraderie brings out the best in you, is supportive, and may, a rising tide lifts all boats. So,
yeah. And I mean, just to add on to that, you brought up the fact that we both are athletes in our own right. I think, like, we talk about this all the time, like the fact that we come from an athletic background, but I really think people underestimate how big of a deal that is transitioning to what we do in terms of business, because by nature, when you're an athlete, you are competitive, right? If you want to be the best, you're going to be competitive with certain people. But typically, when you're on a really good team or you're surrounded by other good people in your craft that you're constantly around, the competition becomes different. It's not, in my experience, it doesn't become a thing of envy where you look at these people that you're around and you're saying, I hate this guy. Like, I hate the success that he's getting. It typically turns into, all right, like, he's doing this thing, like, I got to step my shit up too. It's more positive. And I think that is what makes our relationship dynamic work so well.
Yeah, I had the same experience as an academic, as a young academic. Someone gave me this piece of advice, said, pick someone in the field that you respect, who's 3-5 years ahead of you, and just pay attention to what he or she is doing. Look at their curriculum vitae, what's on there, and use that for inspiration, because they're where you want to be in 5 years, in that sense. And there's nothing good comes of diminishing that person.
Yeah,
I think in that sense. So let's talk about this idea about the physical part of your lives. Again, I have a saying. I have lots of sayings, and one of those is to live on your edge. That is, you want to be challenging yourself so much that you're growing, but you're not overcome with anxiety and stress. But you're not pulling back so much that you're sort of bored and listless. And so that notion of living on your edge obviously can happen in a variety of domains. It sounds like nowadays you're living on your edge as artists and as entrepreneurs. But talk a little bit about living on your edge as an athlete, so as a boxer and as a basketball player.
Living on my edge in what sense directly, sorry, when it comes to this?
Well, I mean, like, it sounds to me, Ryan, that when you were a basketball player, you put everything you had into it. Like, it crowded out everything else. And
right.
you pushed yourself hard enough that you had a devastating injury. But I'm just curious about your experience as an athlete. I think Zamour's already alluded to some of the benefits that has come as you have pivoted out of that.
Oh, okay. So I think the most important thing that I've noticed growing up as an athlete is that I am different. So my experience and a regular student's experience are not the same experiences, right? So like university for me as a university athlete and university for someone who's just a student are not the same experiences.
Not even close.
I got to experience both sides of that in the same career of my university program.
I see.
Right? Like that's weird. You know, like, so the athletes that go to university, they're athletes for their whole career and they graduate as athletes. I started as an athlete and I graduated as a student. I actually witnessed the transition. I kind of had some spillover because people knew me as an athlete. So it's still kind of maybe a little bit more advanced than most students because people still knew I was on the team, you know, but as the years went on and I got further and further away from the team and away from the program. And now I'm just showing up to class as like a student. No one knows, like, I'm not wearing the hoodie anymore. I'm not wearing basketball gear. So like teachers aren't looking at me or treating me like an athlete. It's just, I'm literally just a student now. I notice the shift and it's very interesting. Just like the respect that changes when you're an athlete, the access that is granted to you, the leniency that we do get as an athlete sometimes. And to be completely frank, getting girls was easy, like super easy as an athlete, right? Like that's just what it was like. And, you know, I think when you dedicate that much of your life to your sport, my weekends were gone. I had no weekends. I didn't see family. I saw my teammates more than I saw my own family, you know? When you do that, you kind of look to your teammate for guidance. You look to them as your new all-seeing eye and your new leaders and your new peers. Like, I stopped even like, I didn't really listen to even like anyone, you know, when I was in university, when it came to like how I should do things. I would talk to the older players on my team, like, and I think it's similar to the workforce where it's like, how are you going to tell me how to be a millionaire if you're not a millionaire yourself? You know? So in that same breath, it's like, how can someone tell me how to be a student athlete if they're not student athletes? I wouldn't even listen to people that are like, oh, you do this. I'm just like, you don't even know this life, you know? And I think that translates, and it has translated into my personal life and my career, where it's like, I think I've had to break some of those just concepts and mentalities to an extent. I think it's still accurate to an extent. But one example I can give you is like, as an entrepreneur, I would meet people, women specifically, and if they weren't also entrepreneurs, I would assume that they don't understand what I have to go through or what type of life I live. And that's not necessarily true. You know, just because someone else is an entrepreneur doesn't mean they can't understand or can't navigate with someone who is. But I would just shut that down entirely. And I think that just came from my athlete mentality, where it's like, if you're not a basketball player, I don't want to hear from you. Like, you know, if you don't know nothing about the sport, like, or even coaches that tell you stuff, and it's like, you never even played professional. Like, why are you, like, how are you even a coach? You know, but like, that just kind of comes from just truth, right? There is truth to it sometimes, but also just a form of a lack of willingness to learn from people outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, I think that's a good development in the following way. Is I think there are these sort of adjacent set of experiences that can inform, let's say, art. You know, like science can inform art, you know, or like someone who may work in fashion can actually help with regard to media and so on, because there are sort of these, they're not totally overlapping, but there's some overlapping experiences or skills, in that sense. I can appreciate your change because I remember being I think I was a junior in college, and I was playing club lacrosse, and I picked it up late, and I was one of the better players on the club team. But it's club, right? It's meant to be fun and relaxed. And, we didn't even have a real coach. We had like a player coach and so on. And I contemplated walking on to the varsity team, which was very competitive.
Yeah.
And I eventually decided not to do it because I thought I had a shot to make it. But then I was going to go from being like someone who played for fun and played the entire game to the guy who was just... In high school, in football, we called it scab squad, right? Like, right, the guys who were just played against the first team. And then I knew it would have crowded out everything else in my college career. And I just made a rational decision. I mean, the only regret is I'll never know if I would have been able to make it. But it wasn't a regret in terms of because I just wasn't willing to give up all those other things, that very rich campus life that's there. So it's cool you got to see both. Zamour, what about you with boxing? You still box and you coach.
Yeah, I coach. I was supposed to compete last year, but COVID came and ruined everyone's plans.
Of course, yes.
But specifically, sorry, what was the question again?
Well, I mean, I actually thought of you a little bit more for this question than Ryan. I think that by virtue of boxing.
Yeah.
So I really love, there's a saying, I can't figure out, it's not a Hemingway essay. I'm not sure who wrote it, but I read it back in the 90s in an Esquire. It talked about boxing as sort of a metaphor for life in the following way. And it said that the best punch is closest to the worst.
Yeah, I get that.
Right. And so can you explain, so for someone who's never boxed, can you explain why the best punch is closest to the worst?
See, the way I interpret it, everyone's probably heard, the best punch is the one you don't see coming. And, the one you don't see coming is typically the worst. It's the worst punch, right? Just from a technical standpoint in boxing, and this is something I go over a lot with my personal training clients. A lot of people, when they get into it, they're super tense all the time when they're punching. It's like they're flexing the entire way through. I can see it on their faces, their faces are scrunched when they're throwing a punch. And what they tell you, or, what I teach and what a lot of my coaches taught me is you need to be relaxed all the time until the point of impact, right? Because you're at your quickest, you're at your most fluid. And then when you need to execute, that's when you apply the pressure, right? So the problem is, a lot of people walk in with this mentality that they need to force their way through everything by applying pressure from the beginning to the end. And what typically ends up happening is your moves are then telegraphed, right? And then you don't see the punch coming that, is going to put you on your ass, right? So the reason why that's relative to real life is because, nothing that Ryan and I have done since we've entered the freelance world wasn't calculated. You know what I mean? There's definitely been things that have happened in our career so far that, we didn't necessarily plan for, in terms of opportunities that have come up, right? There's some opportunities you just can't plan for. But, Ryan talked earlier about the reason why he named his brand the way that he did, right? A lot of people will create an Instagram account with, some username just because it sounds cool. But they're not really thinking further than that. I think I told Ryan ages ago that he's probably the only photographer in this city that I know that has a brand, a clothing brand and all that too. I'm pretty sure you are, right? And it just goes back to everything being calculated, right? I specifically started with drone stuff first instead of photography, because I wanted to be a little bit different than most people in my industry at that time. So for me, it's all cyclical, right? Even with boxing as well, everything about it is every day when I do it, it's reminding me of different aspects in my life one way or another, You know, there's this person in front of me that I'm supposed to beat, and it's a constant chess match. They're trying to think of things 2 steps ahead of me. I'm trying to think of things 4 steps ahead of them, and we're really just waiting until someone messes up, right? And that's relative to everything that I do in this freelance world. Like it really is, because every interaction that you have with someone while you're freelance is a lot more, how would I say this? I would argue it's a lot more vital than it is someone that works a 9 to 5,
because of the instability.
There's the instability side of it, but every interaction you have with someone is literally 1 step away from them introducing you to someone else.
I see. Or
like introducing you to another opportunity. Like Ryan and I could share plenty of stories where it's like you'll do a gig for like that random brand, right? And a year later, that person says to you, hey, my husband's cousin like works for Nike or something, and I recommended you in passing this conversation. They want your email. Can I have it? And it's like, now that I've been in it for long enough, I think of these things, right? I'm very calculated with which opportunities I take on, which ones I don't. Is it worth my time? Is the time worth the money? Is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, these are all things that I think about, but I do know that everything is related, right? I'm thinking about every single step. So, you know, I find that, yes, I love boxing. I've been doing it forever, like over 10 years now. And as I get older, I understand more and more why like these old guys stay in the sport forever when it comes to coaching, because it's just, there's so many life lessons in there. And I'll probably be one of those guys on the side too, but that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I had actually one of my early episodes was with a boxer and a boxing coach. And it's one of my favorite episodes because it broke down, I think, some mythology. Like, I thought of the boxer as this sort of, yes, a lone athlete, but I didn't realize how much coaching matters in boxing, you know, and that you actually, even as a boxer, need a team in order to excel, even though you are the final, you know, performer, decision maker, and so on. And then I like this idea about the best punch being closest to the worst in the following way, which is, and this relates to, quote, I'm going to misspeak it, but Steve Pressfield in The War of Art says that it's better to be in the arena being stomped by the bull than it is to be in the stands or in the parking lot. And the idea is, if you want to box and you want to win, you have to put yourself in harm's way. You know, you have to risk getting knocked out in order to knock out. Yeah. And so if you just running and dodging and keeping far away, you never can accomplish anything. And so I like that idea. To me, it feels like when you box well, you're on your edge, you know, just naturally. Yeah. Like we can use like Mayweather as an example. He's the best defensive boxer of all time. And, you know, they tell you in boxing, you want to hit and not get hit. Right. And if you ever watch highlights of Floyd Mayweather fight, you know, the random average fan wasn't a fan of him because he wasn't, you know, knocking people's blocks off like all the time. But for someone like me and like people who just, even other athletes who just understand like the dedication and time it takes into your craft, to know that it's one thing to just constantly avoid punches, right? It's another to make someone just barely miss you. Yes, right. This came up in that episode, right? Like Matrix, right? Yeah, like missed by an inch, right? Not even, sometimes it's literally by like a couple centimeters. He just knows like, I'm going to make you miss just by enough that'll make you think that if you try harder next time, you're going to be able to hit me. And I'm just going to keep repeating this process and you're never going to hit me. And I'll tell you from personal experience, like the most exhausting thing in boxing is trying to hit someone and missing. Like, that's the most exhausting thing. Not like hitting someone and letting them land on you. You need the connection. If you miss that, that's just useless energy. It's useless. It's literally useless. Right. So think about how that applies to real life, right? Like, how many times have we all done something where you've put in so much time and energy, and for some unknown factor, the mark has been missed, and you feel like you just wasted a whole bunch of time. Now you're like, why did I even do this? Yes. You know? Yeah, and I think that's why I always talk about having this artist approach, which is you're not working for the outcome, you're working with the process. Knowing time and time again. So I want to jump into your friendship.
Yeah.
And so how did you two become friends? How did you two end up launching, which I think is a very fun podcast, WNTT, We Need to Talk? What's the story behind the evolution of your remarkable friendship?
It's quite an interesting story. It's always funny telling it because it's basically my fault that we weren't friends earlier. But I have a history and an upbringing of moving a lot when I was a child. My mom was a single mother, so I've lived many different places in the GTA. I've been to 11 or 12 different schools. I moved about 10 times in my life. So,
and GTA is Greater Toronto area?
Greater Toronto area, yeah. So I moved about 10 times, been to about 10 to 11 schools since I was 5 years old. It's not a normal transition for a kid.
No, it's not.
But as a result of that, there's been a negative and a positive outcome from it. The positive outcome is that I make friends very easily. I've never been a shy person. I don't have.
I know that.
Yeah, so like, I was forced as a kid to just meet new people all the time. You know, I never really got to get comfortable with someone. I never really got the opportunity to be the shy kid because I'm always new. You know, so it kind of forced me out of my bubble. So I never really had a bubble, to be honest. And then also being an athletic kid, I'm always on a sports team. So that's probably like the easiest way for me to make friends. I just get to a school, I play some ball for a little bit. They're like, oh, he's a ball kid. Now I'm everyone's friend. I don't even know nobody, but because I'm good at basketball, that was like my in, you know? So, but as a result of that, I moved so many times. I actually went to school with Zamour when I was about 5 or 6 years old. That was one of my first schools I went to when I was younger. And I moved from there and went to many different schools since then, grew up in Scarborough and Toronto, different places. And when Facebook first, was developed and you started adding people, you just add anyone. There's like, at that time, it wasn't like, there's no ratio. There's not like, oh, I'm going to add people I know. You're just adding anyone. And it was actually cool to have more friends on Facebook. Like they had like a max of 5,000 friends or something. And then people who had 5,000 maxed out friends, they're like the cool. You're like, how do you have so many friends? Like, but it was cool to have more friends. It was just the thing, even if you didn't know them. So I don't remember when I added Zamour or he added me. I have no idea, but I knew I didn't know everyone on my Facebook. So I remember seeing Zamour there, but I didn't remember who he was. It could have been anybody, right? And because I hadn't seen him since I was a kid, I didn't even remember his name really, So I did YouTube for a while, and I would make videos about relationships and very like forward and blunt videos about like, personalities and women and men and a lot of like contradictory and contrasting videos. And a friend of mine was like, oh, like you should start a podcast. This is before podcasts were like popular. So they're just like, it was kind of like only like the Joe Biden podcasts were really popular, Joe Rogan. That was about it. Like no one was really doing podcasts like that. I didn't even know what a podcast was at the time. And I'm like, what's a podcast? He's like, oh, it's kind of like audio thing. The same thing you do on YouTube, just like an audio version. And I'm like, okay, I don't really know about it, but let me see if people care about it. So I made a post on my Facebook asking who would be interested if I made a relationship talk based podcast. And a lot of people were like, yeah, that'd be dope. Like, I love your YouTube videos, blah, blah, blah. And then Zamour was the only person who was like, yo, I'd be down to do it with you. And I was like, oh, shit, I didn't even think about that. I'm like, I can't do a podcast by myself. I'm like, I need somebody like who's like, I could do one by myself, but then I have to have guests every episode and rely on somebody. And I'm just like, nah, I'd rather just have like someone I can rely on. Mm-hmm. So he messaged me and we had to talk about it. And I'm like, I mean, if you're down, he's like, yeah, I'd be down. I'm like, okay, if we're doing this, we gotta be committed. Like, we can't be like here and there. Like, no, I'm in. I'm like, all right, cool. At that time, I didn't know who he was. I thought he was just some guy on my Facebook that's like, yo, I'm down. And I'm like, all right, cool. No one else said they're down. So, all right, cool, let's do it. And so we had never made a video together. We had never even met at that time in my brain. So I was like, okay, yo, to start this, let's do one video on my YouTube channel first to kind of just see how we vibe together. So our first video we ever did together was on my channel called Long Distance Relationships. And we just literally just freestyled a video about our perspectives on long distance. He talked about his relationship. I talked about mine. And we just had this camaraderie, like you're saying, and this natural, back and forth nitpicking and like just comedy and sarcasm between us both. That was our first time ever doing anything together. And I was like, this is dope. And yeah, I came up with the name We Need to Talk just because that's always the 4 words, that are always dreaded in a relationship when you hear it. you're like, oh fuck, like what is it now? Like it's always negative. And I thought because our perspectives and him being more of a emotional person and me being more of a harsh person and our energies balancing out, he like sometimes you don't want me, you know.
Yeah,
sometimes you want
too much. It's like a yin and yang kind of.
Yeah, literally. Right. Sometimes you don't want Ryan's perspective, and sometimes someone's like, "Yo, just tell it to me straight. I don't want some more soft stuff." You know what I mean? So it was good. It was good, and it just felt right. And we've been almost 5 years now. We've been doing this, and it's
long time.
That's how we kind of started it and even met. And it was like a aha moment when he brought up a story when we were together, and he's like, he brought up a mutual friend of ours, and he brought up a story of how we actually saw each other in the mall at the bus terminal. And then it all clicked to me, and I'm like, wait, how do you know this guy? And he's like, Garthwood. I'm like, how do you know what Garthwood is? Like the school. And I'm like, he's like, bro, we went to Garthwood together. I'm like, and literally like, at that moment, I'm looking at him, and I remember like there was a kid that we used to, like back in the day, used to race. Like racing was the cool thing. Racing and soccer. Those are like the most popular sports. When you're a kid, soccer and just racing. That's all we cared about. Who's the fastest and who can play soccer. And I remembered Zamour was one of the fastest kids in the school at the time. But I had a blurry face to his person. To his, like literally, I'm like, I don't know who this kid is. And then when he told me, I'm like, that's you. Like, this is the same kid that I've never put a face to. And it was a mind fuck for me. Like, it was really crazy. That's and fun. We've had an amazing friendship since then.
And how much has the podcast helped develop that friendship?
I think quite a bit. Like I was just saying to Ryan the other day, like it was funny how the podcast is the only thing that I've ever done this consistently. You know, like I play sports all my life. There was a time where I played sports every week. You might sit out of practice, or you may miss a game. Like for us, we did miss a few episodes before, but like I don't know many people that have done the same thing for nearly 5 years, right? And we do the entire thing ourselves. You shoot the whole thing, we edit the whole thing, audio and video. We don't have producers. Like we do everything ourselves. And I don't even know if that's because we, you know, I'm sure we could get someone to do this stuff, but I think we enjoy the process of it. It's part of the routine. So we just do it. And I think that there have been plenty of times where Ryan and I will look back at earlier episodes or earlier clips and just kind of laugh and like reminisce over shit that's happened in the past. Some things that are not even close to being the same. And then some things that happened 3 years ago, we're like, yeah, that's still the same. You know what I mean? Like this pattern that we've been living. So I definitely think it's helped the friendship for sure.
Is there an example of that, or example of a way that it has sort of helped develop this?
Yeah. So I saw this meme a while back that basically just said, I don't know why guys start a podcast instead of just going to therapy. Right? And like, you know, I definitely understand what they're trying to say. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. Like, okay.
I've cried on my podcast. Yeah. I'll tell you that. I've cried on my podcast.
There was, you know, we've had live shows, but we both cried and all this type of stuff. But here's the thing. When there was an incident recently, people were talking about this thing that happened, and I'm having to talk about like why I do the podcast, right? They're like, why do you do the podcast? And I literally verbatim, my first response was, listen, I've been doing the podcast for like close to 5 years now. And I literally do it because it is so good for my mental health. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like if you asked me this in year one, why I do it, I don't even think I would have given that same answer. I would have said, because it's fun. Like I do it with Ryan. It's fun. We talk to
you get laughs, you get insights. Yes.
Good laughs. It's hilarious. People watch it, which is all still true. But, you know, when you do it as long as we do, it's honestly like creating a digital journal.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
I thought of it that way. Yeah, you guys are creating a shared history.
You know what I mean? Because
everything is documented
for
the last 4 years.
On a weekly or bi-weekly basis, right? Like
current events, you know, things that happen, deaths.
I started writing in a journal in the past year, but it's like I literally have something I can watch and hear what I said like years ago and see, oh, do I align with that still? Do I feel differently? And it's good. Like, it's good. I think it's good to get these thoughts out and talk to someone else, whether it's Ryan or a guest as well, and just, unpack things. Because there have been plenty of times where, like, I've heard Ryan say some shit on the podcast, and then after he says, yo, I've never said this before. You know what I mean? It's like, I've never said this before out loud or publicly, one of these things. And you can see it. Like, when you're listening to the podcast, it's one thing where you can hear these conversations, but then we also do the video, and then people can see how we change. So, I sent someone a clip today, like one of my favorite clips of me and Ryan talking about the stock guy. And like, that was 3 years ago, 2017.
Wow.
3 years ago. No, 4 years ago. Sorry,
I don't know the stock guy. What do you mean by that?
So,
is the stock guy the basic bitch of men? Is that...
No. So basically, what I said was, this girl was trying to say that, like, a lot of girls ain't shit, right? And I said, yeah, okay, that may be true, but like I said, look, like, there's a lot of women who give credit to men who do the absolute bare minimum because the guys that they're used to dealing with are trash.
I see. They ain't shit too.
Yeah, they ain't shit too. So it's like, I may just ask this girl how her day was. She's amazed. She's amazed because the guys that she's used to dealing with literally don't care about anything. We're average. No, not average, but you know what I mean. Like,
I get it.
We're saying like the stuff that you guys are surprised about or wowed about. We're like, this is like, we came just like this. This is stock. This is the basic features of a man.
I see. That's interesting. Right.
Yeah,
it's like a car reference.
What'd you say? This is how we came out the plant.
A stock car, right? Like right off the assembly line.
Yeah, no bells and whistles. This is literally the basic model of the vehicle. And you're like, oh my God, there's electric windows. It's like,
yeah, living in LA, like, if you're a guy and you have your own place, your own car, and a job, you're already ahead of like 90% of dudes out there, right? Like that kind of thing. I get it. I've heard this thing too. So, Zamour, do you cry easier than Ryan?
Probably. We haven't really cried all that much on the show, but I would assume so. I'm the more emotional one, so.
How do we measure that?
Yeah.
Frequency and intensity. I asked this only because I did a room on Clubhouse. When was your last good cry? And I was surprised, first of all, by the number of men who came to the stage to talk about either how long it had been or how it had just been the day before. And to sit and hear men talk about and talk in mixed company among strangers about crying. Of course, there was a lot of crying in that room, as you might imagine, because people talking about their reasons why they were crying made other people cry. But I think it's a great skill as a man to be able to cry, because we don't get. And so when I asked you that, it wasn't in a negative way. It actually was in a positive way.
Yeah.
No, I was genuinely asking, how do you measure it? Like, for me, I know every time I have cried, and they've all been for the same reasons.
Okay.
So I either cry at funerals. I've been to a lot of funerals.
Okay.
So I always cry at funerals. Actually, there's only one funeral I haven't cried at, and it felt weird to not cry. But I think I didn't cry because I was desensitized to it. And then I was mad that I didn't cry because I'm just like, that means I'm so far gone and upset that I'm not even crying. I'm like, this is actually scary because like I've gone to so many funerals at this point that I'm not crying, and this is weird. Like, you know what I mean? That's what it felt like to me. Because this is a place where I usually would cry. And I'm like, I've dealt with so much death now that I'm like, I'm not even crying. I'm like, what is going on? And then I cried when dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, I guess, a situation that came from my family members, and just being in the middle of dealing with that and being the only person to witness this, so like everyone else in my family knows about it, but they only know about it through me as a story. But it is me as an experience that has to actually witness said thing. So even explaining it to people would make me cry. I explained the actual situation at one of our podcast live shows, which I didn't plan to do, but it just kind of came out based on the energy in the room. And even just explaining the story, I started crying again. I'm like, oh fuck, like I can't even talk. I couldn't even talk about it. Like now I'm more comfortable now talking about it. But at the time was so fresh that I'm in a room full of 100 of our fans, and we're kind of just talking about mental health, and it kind of just happened because I was like, most of you guys have never seen me cry. I'm always the strong, tough, hard ass, person, a Mr. KOA that online, and no one can break him, and I never get heartbreaking, all this which is true in most cases. So seeing me cry made a lot of people cry because they're like, whoa, like they've never seen me like that. And it was actually, I think that was like a big moment for me in terms of my growth as a man, as a person, and just it really solidified how therapeutic the podcast is, because I'm like, I would never do this in any other setting ever, and I felt comfortable enough around not only Zamour but the strangers in that room that tune in every week and paid real money to come watch us talk on stage. I'm like, I can trust you guys. Like, I don't even know most of you guys, but I felt that to trust them, So yeah, like I think my cries only come from trauma for me. I've never cried for anything else. I never cried from stress, never cried from just being overwhelmed. Like, you know what I mean? It's literally like something traumatic happens, and that's kind of the only way it breaks me.
I see. Yeah, well, I think the fact that you can do it, says a lot, because I think for too many men don't get the message that it's okay to do it, and that it's actually healthy to do it. It's useful to do it, and to be able to have two friends who can support each other, and even to model that behavior, that you're close enough to do it, I think is really important. I realize, Ryan, you didn't get to weigh in on how the podcast has affected the friendship for you.
Oh, yeah, honestly, very similar to what Zamour said. It like it's even like the fact that I'm even laughing about it. It just shows how like intertwined it is in my life now. We both have fans we've developed through the podcast. We've developed some friends through the podcast. I like to call it, we break people's podcast cherries on the podcast. Uh-huh. So a lot of people who've never done podcasts before, they're like, I've never done a podcast. I'm shy. I'm nervous. They come on ours and they're like, well, I want to come back. So like, it's cool to even be that catalyst for some people to even get into the podcast space, whether it's our podcast the first time they ever done it. And maybe some of them start their own podcasts. Some people have started their own. Some people are now comfortable to do other people's podcasts. And I feel like we've been a facilitator for people's comfort, people's safe space, for each other. I make the joke all the time. It's not even a joke, but it is a joke that are, you know how women's periods are like, what's the word?
They start to match up.
How their periods are synchronized. Yes. Like Zamour's and my relationships. Are synchronized.
This is very accurate for you. It really is.
It's so crazy. Like, I'll get in a relationship, he'll get in one. He'll break up, I'll break up. I'll get someone, he'll find someone. He'll break up, I'll break. Like, and it's been at least like we've been doing this for almost 5 years.
You're on the same cycle.
We've been on this, like, it's.
But you know what it is though. Like, I've been in, since we've done the podcast, I've been in 2 relationships. Right, Ryan has been in more, but it just so happens that when I break up or I get out of a relationship, it's literally the exact same time. It's not like it happened to Ryan 1 month and it happens to me the next. In this last breakup, like days. Like, I don't know who said it first. I think you said you broke up, and then days later, I said something in our chat. I didn't even say I broke up. It was like a cryptic message. It might have been a GIF of like the coach walking into the change room, like I'm back in the game kind of thing. And he's like, "Yo, really?" And I'm like, "Yep." Like, same time. And
what's funny is we don't even consult each other before these happen. Yeah. So it's not even like we're manipulating the other to be like, yo, I want to break up. And then the other person's kind of thinking, you know what I mean? It's literally just like we both get to a moment where we break up and we're like, you're single too? It's like, yeah I just broke up with my girl. Like, oh my God. Like, so it's funny.
So basically really your girlfriend should follow the other guy's girlfriend on Instagram to know what's about to happen to them.
Am I next?
So I want to finish up and do a little bit of kind of rapid fire, if I can, to get both of you kind of short, just what comes to mind with regard to these topics. So the first thing is, what advice would you give your fellow man, your friends, about developing a remarkable friendship like the two of you have?
I'd probably just say, don't be afraid to be open, because 9 times out of 10, like, you and your boys are either thinking the same thing or going through the same thing. And when you're younger, you don't even want to talk about it because you're afraid that it might emasculate you or make you feel less of a man. But when you realize we're all thinking the same thing, it makes things a lot easier to deal with.
I would say just remove your ego. Egos are damaging in both friendships and relationships. We all have ego. There's nothing wrong with ego in certain places, but I think ego does not belong in friendships or relationships. I think ego belongs in competitiveness, in sport, in work, and anything that needs you to achieve something above somebody, whether get a position, get a job, get money, whatever. Like, ego is great there because it propels you. Mm-hmm. But I think there's no place for ego in a relationship or a friendship because you're not trying to beat anybody.
Yeah, that reminds me of, there's a saying in improv by Del Close, who's like the kind of father of improv. It says, we're all supporting actors. And, the idea is that as an improv group, if everybody's trying to make everyone else into the star, then, when it's your time to shine, you'll be able to shine. I think that's well said. How do you feel about being single, about your single life?
I honestly love it. I think my only thing is my goals are catching up to my age. And what I mean by that is, as much as I love being single, I do enjoy it. I also enjoy being in relationships as well. Mm-hmm. But I now have, I always have, but more so now, I have goals that involve a person, right? And for those goals to happen, such as having a kid, I want to have kids. I definitely want to have kids. That's not even a negotiable thing. I definitely want to have kids, and I don't want to have kids with a single person. And when I say single person, I mean we could both be single, be talking to each other, but I don't want to have kids while single and not know, like, some random person. I don't have a baby, just some girl I'm sleeping with.
Yeah.
So, which would mean I'd have to know someone long enough, which essentially would be, whether it's a Tyler or not, some form of relationship. Okay. So I am more, I guess, leaning towards meeting or knowing or being with someone in that capacity in order to have a child with them. That is actually a focus I have now, that, okay, the next person I'm giving my time to like that. Do you want to have a kid in the next 3 to 4 years? Like, for real? And if not, then let's just not even, because that is something I actively want to do. But single, I think I don't view single as amazing as I used to, because my communication and my authenticity of myself has risen. Because I think the reasons I used to love being single is because the fear I had of talking while in a relationship.
Oh, interesting.
So, like,
it was safer to be single for you.
Right. So single would seem like it's better because that's the only time I was honest. So I'd view single like, oh, I wish I was single because I could just tell a girl I don't want to see you. I could just tell a girl I'm sleeping with somebody else. And no one could do anything to me. Like, it was the freedom that came with single, not necessarily the act of being single. If I was in a relationship but felt like I was single in terms of my personal behavior and my freedom, I would not mind being in a relationship. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's sort of the term solo gets used that way, and it's part of the reason I chose solo as the title of this podcast and not calling it single, for example, was that the idea of solo, yes, it might have to do with, relationship status, but it also, I think, more has to do with the psychology, right? So not every single person is solo, and not every married person is non-solo. Right. It has to do, I think, a little bit with this notion of autonomy, that you still are able to keep part of your identity. You don't have to completely merge your life with this other person. And as you were sort of saying, live in fear of being your true self.
Yes.
Yeah. Zamour?
So could you repeat the question?
Oh, just about your feelings about being single. It sounds like you're single less often.
Yeah, I'm single way less often. I said the other day that, I'm almost 30. I'm turning 29 in March. I've been in a relationship 7 out of the 9 years of my 20s so far. Being single now is very different. I live on my own. I have my own place.
You'd be very popular in LA.
Yeah, because I also have a car.
Yeah, and a job, like 10 jobs.
I can tell you right now, I'm popular right now in Toronto. I'll tell you that.
Ryan's making a face right now.
I know. I will say that being single right now is pretty fucking great, if I'm being honest with you.
Please,
right?
yeah.
Like if I'm being really honest, because
Ryan's still making that face.
Because Ryan knows. Because Ryan knows. Like, I'm used to being in long-term relationships.
Okay.
So now I have made the conscious decision that I am absolutely not getting into another relationship, and I'm being very upfront about that with anyone I talk to until I am truthfully ready. Right? I feel like a lot of the times I may have gone in relationships because it was comfortable. It's a fun of a dog. The nickname that we have is Le Chien. Le Chien, as it
French for
dog.
Le Chien.
So anyway,
there's some inside jokes going on in this podcast. My apologies to listeners.
So I just spent a lot of time in relationships. I've decided I'm no longer going to enter into another relationship until I know for sure that it is something that I truthfully want, like, in that moment in time. Because I told Ryan the other day, there was a girl who straight up told me, like, she wanted to date. That's what she wanted to do. And I obviously declined. But when he asked me why, I said honestly, because I feel like I'm too good for her. Like, I felt like I would be dating down. Even though aesthetically she was, like, beautiful, like, everything about her was amazing, but I was like, she's not providing the things to me that I would need. So if I enter that relationship knowing that I'm only being fulfilled in maybe let's just say like 6 or 5 out of 10 things, it's going to cause problems down the road, right? And it's like, I don't need to put myself in a situation that's going to cause me problems. So I'm now navigating life in my late 20s for the first time as a single person, and trying to navigate that with all the knowledge that I've accumulated over the past 5 years doing this podcast, where we're constantly talking about, like, being open with women and, like, being very upfront. So now I know, all right, I'm going to take everything that I talked about and put it into practice now. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
You're having fun with it. I can just see.
Yeah, I really enjoy it.
That, by the way, this is a cheat code.
Tell by the lighting setup.
This is a cheat code, is to be able to look past someone's physical attractiveness and see inside, and to recognize, while that may be appealing and exciting, looks. It's just that you adapt to looks much quicker than you adapt to someone's intelligence or their, how cultured they are or how funny they are, or something of that nature. Yeah. So I think that's actually a step in the right direction. So related to that, to both of sort of what you two were talking about, is this notion of authenticity. To how do you work to be your most authentic self? I mean, this is something that I liked about you from the moment I listened to you, I should say, I was like, oh, these guys, I think by virtue of having done this podcast for so long, and for it to be such an honest, authentic representation of your views, that it now seems to be part of your personas, even when WNTT is not happening. Is that fair to say?
It is 100% fair to say. I think we often say, like, when we start the podcast with a guest or something, we're like, pretend the camera's not on, because it's just a conversation. Yeah. Like, we record them so that they're documented, but we don't turn anything on. Like, there are some shows, like, and some podcasts and stuff where people turn on, like, the podcast voice or, the podcast personality, and that can be entertaining for some people, because that is them when they are in the podcast, but I am the same me. Zamour is the same me in or out of that podcast. It just happens to be recorded and filmed and documented. Yeah. But it's not like the same stuff I say there. Like, it's so, like, put it this way, it's been so relevant and crucial to my development as a person, and so tightly aligned with my life, that women I meet that know I have a podcast literally listen to the podcast and study me. Yeah. Because they're actually like, I know you believe this shit. I know so I know, like, there's girls who have been like, oh, I heard you say on the podcast that you don't really like a girl that's like this. I'm like, oh yeah, like, I did. You're right. She's like, oh, I know, I heard in the podcast that you say you like girls that are like this. I'm like, I did.
Correct.
Like,
so Ryan, Brian, like,
Yeah.
didn't we say the other day though that, you know, we're done doing the whole dance where it's like, I gotta get to know you and like all this stuff. Like, it's still gonna happen.
Yeah,
but if a girl really wanted to get to know Zamour in 2021, she could listen to the last year of the podcast. Like, listen to a couple episodes, it'll tell you quite a bit. It's like, there are a lot of women are always asking, like, my guy doesn't really talk about his feelings or doesn't say all these things or tell me much. It's like, me and Ryan talk every week for like 2 hours about everything that is there, you know?
Yeah. So is the podcast therapy for the two of you? That joke, you made that joke earlier.
I would say so. Yeah.
100%. 100%. I've never, like Zamour even said, like, there has been numerous occasions where, like, for the podcast, we don't really plan them. Like, we have like an idea of a topic. I'll create a question for people to talk about and discuss. Mm-hmm. But the question isn't the entirety of the podcast every week. The question is kind of like a topic to kind of create some discussion on their page. But the podcast itself is completely freestyled. We've been freestyling for 5 years. Like, that's very true.
I forgot about that too. Like, we don't
freestyling. Like, there's people who come to podcasts like this point. This is what's in the news right now. Mm-hmm. This is what's happening. We got to touch about this. And that's fine too. I have no problem with that. There's people who literally have like assigned topics. This week we're going to talk about this, talk about this. I've seen people have their podcasts where on the podcast they even have time slots. So like, from this time we're talking about this. From this time, I'm like, we have been freestyling for 5 years, and I don't see it's changing because that's literally what works, and people love it because it's literally been us. Like. And because it's freestyling, I literally say things I've never said for the first time on the podcast.
Right.
Because it's not planned. So like, when we dive into a hole about something, someone asks me a question or Zamour asks me a question. Oh, yo, Ryan, what about this? What's your thoughts on this? And at that moment, I will give you my first time thoughts on the topic that I've never talked about. And now it's public, you know? So it's like, I have so many moments where I'm like, wow, like that's what I believe. I guess I just said it. Like, you know what I mean? So because of that, like, it has definitely been therapy because it's almost like you're talking to a shrink and they're just asking you questions. They're not telling you anything. They're not leading you anywhere. Just like, what do you think? And you're for the first time being introspective and talking about something you've never just discussed before out loud to yourself, but the thoughts are there. Mm-hmm. And all that's happening is Zamour or I am giving each other that space to try to just express that.
Yeah.
Last question. What could break this remarkable friendship? What could break this camaraderie that you two have?
If I sleep with one of Zamour's ex-girlfriends. and vice versa.
I genuinely I agree with Ryan, first off. But okay. I genuinely hate how straight-faced he is.
I'm dead serious.
Like, yeah.
Like, if I'm not gonna drop names. If I slept with the last person Zamour, had a relationship with, he would hate me. Like, what? Like,
there'd be no coming back from that.
You know what I mean? Like, there's certain
line. It's a line you don't cross.
That's a line where it's like, that was deliberate. Like, because
you knew. Yeah.
Because not only are these partners that we've had close to our hearts, whether we're with them or not.
Sure, yes. It's still meaningful even though the relationship has ended. Yeah.
No, but not even that. Like, they both, like, whoever these partners are that we've introduced to each other.
Yeah.
So it's like, for you, there is no like, I didn't know or it just happened. Like, that's a very deliberate, like, I'm gonna fucking hurt this guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So that's honestly, like, truthfully, the only thing I can really think of that would be like no coming back from is like if you literally deliberately went and did that, or I literally deliberately went and went after one of his loves or his past loves.
Okay. Yeah.
Otherwise, like work stuff, business stuff, stupid small fights, like that's like it had to be something where it's like you're trying to hurt me. Like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah. That'd probably be my answer too.
All right, that's kind of, I didn't know what to expect by answering that question or asking that question. That's great, gentlemen. I feel lucky that I met you. I'm inspired by you. You're light years ahead of where I was at the same age, and I think part of the reason that you are is not only because you spend time talking to each other in this authentic way, but also because you've embraced each other as friends. You're growing and you're making each other better people. That's clearly obvious to me, and I hope that this As I said, this is part of a series on making remarkable friends. What I hope in part to do is to inspire people to work on maintaining their good friendships that already exist, making them great, to developing new ones. And then, to be honest, if you have a bad relationship, you have a bad friendship, a toxic friendship, it might be time to move on from that. And I think it's important for people to see what a good friendship is like in order to recognize what a bad friendship is like in that way.
100%.
And so I thank you for your time, and I will see you on Clubhouse.
Yes, we will.
See you.
Appreciate it, Peter. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. For more about our guests and show notes, go to petermcgraw.com. Please subscribe and share with your single friends.